Hello and welcome to The Charity Show, the podcast for charity insiders by charity insiders. If you haven't done so already, please give us a follow on your usual podcast platform. And here's what's coming up in episode 5. So we want to give charities across the UK a free shout out or an opportunity for them to shout out for themselves, give them 30 seconds of free airtime.
Deep into festival season, I'm always fascinated about all the charities associated with this summer season. You've got the likes of the big three that are quite heavily tied together for Glastonbury. Such a powerful platform, a powerful way to raise awareness and funds for these charities.
We need to change the perceptions out there of fundraising. It is a proper job. It is a career. And, fundraisers just do the most amazing things. Fundraisers are helping to cure cancer. They're helping to house the homeless. They're helping to make sure that young children can play sports in their communities. These things wouldn't happen without fundraisers.
Apparently, according to a new report, Sarah and David are the most common names of people who work in the charity sector. So how many Sarahs and how many Davids have we got listening to us this week? That's what I'd like to know. Hello and welcome to episode 5 of The Charity Show with me, Tim Beynon, Head of Marketing Engagement at the Firefighters Charity.
And me, Piers Townley, PR Manager at the Brain Tumour Charity.
How are you doing, Piers? What's been going on? It's election week as we record this. We're coming up to the election. Is it a busy time for you? Has it impacted you in the charity at all?
Yeah, it has, in so much as we've had to get all our ducks in a row for whatever comes next, whatever the landscape looks like. We've analysed all the main parties' manifestos as the last 2 weeks have gone on and just dissected that and put all of that information out on our website and, what it means to healthcare and the NHS and the implications for anyone facing a brain tumour diagnosis from my own charity. And we've also made plans to push out our policies and our campaigns, as a lot of charities are doing now, for whatever new government comes into play. We've recently launched our open letter for a national brain tumour strategy, for example, on our policy lines. That was way back in March. And we're going to be using this call for this strategy as a cornerstone for all our policy work in the coming months. So big shout out to our policy team, to Cameron, to Steph, Liam and Claire. They're all our policy superstars in the last few weeks.
Excellent. Busy time for them, I imagine. It's a funny one, isn't it? Because it doesn't affect some charities more than others. It hasn't really affected us at the Firefighters Charity. I suppose we're entirely apolitical, so really the whole general election doesn't really affect us a huge deal at all. It affects the fire rescue services to a degree, but it doesn't necessarily affect the Firefighters Charity. So luckily, it's not really impacted my day-to-day a great deal, other than the fact that I get fed up of watching the news. There's too much news, too much political campaigning and too many political stunts. I'm not a fan of political stunts. It seems to me that politicians are either playing football or doing bungee jumps or one thing or another, and it just screams general election nonsense to me. So it's nice I'm looking forward to it all being over.
Yeah, the Lib Dems have ran just a stunt campaign from start to finish, haven't we? I suppose, they're the things you remember, Ed Davey doing various things that require him jumping out of things or falling into things.
Yeah, I don't know who advises them on those kind of things, but it just seems I don't see how doing that makes them relatable. Anyway, that's a whole nother podcast. I think probably not us. It's been in terms of me. What's been going on for me this last couple of weeks? Interesting. Following our chat with Zoe last week, I've been having a bit of a play around with some AI tools over the last couple of weeks, and I think I've been pinging you a couple of messages. It is fascinating what AI can do. I turned the two of us into Wallace and Gromit characters. Just put a prompt in and up it came.
I actually really like that. I thought that was quite flattering, actually. All those wrinkles and all those crow's feet and all the lines of stress completely smoothed out. I'm quite happy being a plasters-mated world, I think.
My son said I look like a farmer. I don't know why a farmer, but anyway. There you go. I look like a farmer, apparently, according to him. But yeah, so it's really interesting. Also, just playing around with some of the generative tools that Zoe was talking about in terms of using it for copy and things like that. And it is interesting and it is really fascinating to see what it can do. So I'm really keen to explore a bit more of that at the charity. So I've kind of started to talk to my colleagues about what we can do to explore AI a bit more across the charity as well. So I'm really keen to hear from anybody else who maybe listened to Zoe and has been inspired to try some tools for themselves as well. Let us know how you're getting on and share some of those insights, share some of those tools that you are using and how you're getting on with them. That would be really good to hear. But I also must give a shout out, I mentioned something that we've talked about and that we'd like to offer charities across the UK. We want to offer anybody listening, any charity listening, the opportunity to get a bit of free airtime. Essentially, we know that everyone's advertising budgets are pretty tight at the moment. It's not easy to make that money stretch. So we want to give charities across the UK a free shout out or an opportunity for them to shout out for themselves, give them 30 seconds of free airtime on the charity show, and give them the opportunity to basically introduce their charity, tell us about themselves, promote their website, ask for donations or support, or share a call to action, whatever they want to do. If you can sum it up in 30 seconds or less, ping us a voice message. You might want to write yourself a script. Ping us a voice message, the links to which are in the show notes. We'll add some music to it, we'll edit it and make it sound good, and then we'll play it out in the show. So we'll put some information on the socials about that as well, and that's to keep an eye out for that. But really, really looking forward to seeing if we can get help some charities by giving them a little bit of free airtime. Why not, eh? What's coming up on the show, Piers?
Well, we've got a great one this time round. A recent fundraising report published by the charities Ives Foundation highlighted the UK's record donations to charities over the last year or so. So we're going to be finding out about the psyche of the average British donor and how the fundraising landscape is changing as we speak to Katie Doherty, Chief Executive of the Chartered Institute of Fundraising. What do you make of the fundraising landscape at the moment, Tim?
Fundraising. Well, you and I are comms guys, so we're not fundraisers really. We talk a lot about it and write a lot about it, perhaps, but I wouldn't call myself a fundraiser. But I do keep an eye on what my fundraising colleagues are doing, and obviously need to get involved in helping them to shout about what they're doing. And I suppose personally for me, talking to Katie was really interesting, and I hope people get a lot from the interview that they listen to shortly. But I think one of the things that strikes me that is still fundamentally at the heart of a lot of fundraising is people's individual motivations to want to give. And fundraising and giving is a very personal thing, and it affects people in a lot of different ways. Whatever inspires or motivates or emotionally touches you and triggers you to want to give or support a charity is a really powerful concept. And I think that's something that you can't underestimate the importance of. That really jumped out to me. Lots of other things that fascinates me and I'd like us to talk about more on the show when it comes to fundraising. Things like micro donations. Now, this is a really interesting thing, and I think you sent me a news article about this a little while ago, Piers, that whenever you go to a shop or you go to a supermarket or you go to the petrol station and you pay for whatever it is you're paying, you're increasingly asked whether you'd like to top up just a few pennies. Would you like to top up your payment by 3 or 4p to help fund this charity? And that's really proving really popular, and it's becoming much more common as well. So I think that whole area around micro donations, asking people to give pennies rather than pounds, I think is a really interesting area. So I'm really keen to see if we can get someone onto the show to talk about that going forward as well. And another area that fascinates me is gaming. Now, I'm not really a gamer myself. I play occasionally. I say play. I lose occasionally to my son, who's very good at most games. But using gaming as a tool to fundraise is another really fascinating subject. So very keen. Anyone listening to this who uses gaming in their charity as a way to generate funds, get in touch, let us know about it. Come onto the show and talk about it. And really good to find out more. So yeah, lots to talk about. Fascinating area, and Katie, I'm sure, is going to give us a fascinating insight.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You talk about that, especially the micro donations. I guess that's the electronic version of the old collection tin on the checkout of your local store that you had years and years ago. But yeah, increasingly vast amounts of money are being generated and vast opportunities as well. The odd penny here, the odd 2 pence there. It is a guilt trip, but it works and it's easy to do. Very, very easy to do, actually. Local fast food chains that I go to regularly. I'm not going to name them, but do you want to top up 1 pence? I mean, you'd have to be a cold-hearted person to stand there and say, I'm not going to top up by 1 pence. So yeah, they do work. And very much like you as well, I'm really interested in the gaming and trying to make that as working as a fundraising tool. We've launched gaming campaigns at the Brain Tumor charity before, but we've used our supporters and our community, the experts, the gamers, if you like, to do that. So giving that, empowering them, because they're the experts after all. So streaming and gaming and seeing if we can make that work as an idea and as a campaign. Really, really interesting stuff. Fascinated by personally, and I think this is something we could talk about in the podcast, future episodes, like the rise of the extreme fundraising as well. It's kind of, why run a marathon when you can max it up a bit? Why can you do an ultra marathon? Why can you climb one British mountain peak. Well, go and climb 3 British mountain peaks. It's kind of maxing out the fundraising and those very extreme events that we're seeing a lot more of. We have some of our high-profile supporters, the likes of rugby legend Lewis Moody, taking on 36-hour biking challenges or trekking off to the South Pole. It's no longer just doing a tough mud or similar event. It's like, what can they do that's beyond that to grab people? So, yeah, interesting development.
Just jumping in there a second, Piers, on that one. I think that's a really interesting subject, because I also want to be interested to hear what charities think about the risk element of that, because we all want people to fundraise for us. We want people to do amazing things for us, but we want people to be safe at the same time and not put themselves at risk. But more and more you see people wanting to take on these extreme challenges, doing really things that push their bodies and themselves to their absolute limits, placing themselves at risk. So how do charities feel about that sort of new risk element to fundraising, I wonder?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because like most charities, we have crisis comms plans in place for things like the London Marathon, because obviously as a charity you've got a huge duty of care to your supporters and the fundraisers taking part. And you're right, it's an area that's very interesting and something that you have to be absolutely across the board with.
Well, time again for some news headlines. So what have you spotted over the last couple of weeks, Piers?
Well, we're deep into festival season. Now, I'm always fascinated about all the charities associated with this summer season. You've got the likes of the big 3 that are quite heavily tied together for Glastonbury. It's Oxfam, it's WaterAid, it's Greenpeace, but the likes of Reading and Leeds and Latitude Festival and the huge raft of others that highlight and support, so many organisations, from UK grassroots causes to major international aid projects such as Child.org and ActionAid. It's all really interesting. It's such a powerful platform, a powerful way to raise awareness and funds for these charities. And the sums can be huge. I was reading a report the other day that said in the end of 2023, Glastonbury raised over 3.7 million to charitable causes. In addition to that, 1 million was given to the charity, to Oxfam's crowdfunded DEC appeal, which raised that amount of money for the Syria-Turkey earthquake response that happened that year, 2023. And they also did an online auction as well that raised over £100,000 for the Trussell Trust. So it's going to be interesting to see the amounts that are gathered for this year's festivals and the raft of them that are going on. And, you could be the cynic in you with all the cash that's being made by the acts and the organisers themselves, but the millions raised are, vital funds in the bank for so many organisations.
Yeah, I completely agree. I like you. I not that it was muddy this year. It was lovely, wasn't it? Lovely weather, but didn't have to bother even thinking about the weather. Stayed in and watched it on the telly. But yeah, but you could also say those huge acts, the Coldplays and the Dua Lipas of the world, they attract the revenue. They attract the people to buy the tickets. They attract sponsors. They attract TV revenue and all that kind of stuff. And that is ultimately what helps to fund the charitable work as well. So swings and roundabouts on that front, I think. But incredible work, and pretty unsung, really. You don't hear a great deal about the charitable work that Glastonbury does, or that comes out of Glastonbury, or any of the festivals, really. So yeah, maybe we're the place to give that all a shout out, Piers. Maybe that's what we should do.
Yeah, keep your eyes peeled. Maybe there'll be the charity show festival at some point in the future.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe, possibly. You never know. So yeah, I spotted some couple of interesting stories this week, actually. Lovely story about a 9-year-old chap called Tony Hudgel. So Tony is a double amputee, and very sadly he missed the King's Garden party that he was due to attend because he was stuck in a traffic jam back in May. So he was unable to attend that event. But Queen Camilla heard about this, and this week he has attended a private gathering with her instead, which has been fantastic. So he, as I said, he was stuck on the M20 and unable to get to Buckingham Palace, but he ended up having tea with the Queen at her London residence this week, which is great. And also at that same event, he was awarded his very deserving British Empire Medal, his BEM medal. Now, Tony's story is an incredible one. He had both his legs amputated after he was abused as a baby, and he became the youngest ever recipient of a BEM, which is fantastic. Yeah, he lost both his legs due to injuries that were inflicted by his birth parents, and both of them were jailed for 10 years in 2018. But Tony, being the amazing lad that he is, went on to found the Tony Hudgel Foundation, which has raised more than £1.7 million for charity. And his mission, he says, is to enhance the lives of children who have been affected by physical, emotional or psychological abuse. And he raises funds, and the foundation that he runs raises funds to support the Evelina Children's Hospital. So what an incredible lad, and incredibly deserving of some time with royalty, I think. So I thought that was a lovely story of somebody who's been through a huge amount, but very deserving of his BEM medal, which is fantastic, and of tea with the Queen. So yeah, lovely story.
Yeah, it was. That was a fantastic story. It also was on my radar, Tim, as well, because the only other invited guest who was there with Tony was 11-year-old Lila O'Donovan. And Lila is living with a rare brain tumour and has her and her family been in touch with the brain tumour charity over the years. And she's just such an inspirational little girl, and the family have been great supporters of the work that we do. And like Tony, Lila couldn't be there to the original invite because she was in hospital having treatment. So wonderful to be that she was able to make this very special day. So for Lila and for Tony, yeah, fantastic story.
Brilliant. Good on both of them. Amazing. I've got one other story for us this week, and this is an interesting one. I'm really fascinated to hear from people listening in. Apparently, according to a new report, Sarah and David are the most common names of people who work in the charity sector. So how many Sarahs and how many Davids have we got listening to us this week? That's what I'd like to know. So the research was compiled by Employee Share Scheme specialist Vested, and they basically found that 10% of employees in charities are called Sarah, or just under 10%, 9.73% are named David. So there's every chance that if you work in a charity, you work with a Sarah and or a David. So is that true? Tell us. Comment in the comments on our socials. Let us know. Are you a Sarah or a David? Do you know a Sarah or a David in the charity sector? Or do you have other people who with other names that are common in your charity?
Well, I've actually
keen to know. So
I've actually got some breaking news there, Tim, because Kath Howard over at the Brain Tumour Charity did some in-depth research, and she's come up that actually only 1.6% of the Brain Tumour charities is called David or Sarah. So there's some facts there. So we need to either increase that percentage, or let's see what else we can do.
Wow. You need to recruit some more Sarahs and Davids to but it's always good to buck the trend. That's a good thing, yeah.
Maybe we should change our names just for one episode.
The UK remains one of the most philanthropic and generous nations in the world. And last year, we gave a record £13.9 billion to charity. However, despite topping the charts for generosity, there remains a wealth of challenges and disparities in regard to the fundraising landscape in which we all work. Some things don't change. The poorest parts of the country still give proportionally more than the wealthiest, for example. But some things are changing. The number of people giving regularly is in decline, while the cost of living crisis is impacting the amounts and ways in which people choose to give. The factors that influence people's giving also seemingly change with age, and it was reported recently, young people now pay more attention to what social media influencers say than what charities are trying to tell them directly. Fundraising, meanwhile, is breaking new ground, as technology is changing the way we set about raising money for the causes we all care about. So, with the fundraising landscape seemingly shifting in somewhat seismic waves, we spoke to Katie Doherty, Chief Executive of the Chartered Institute of Fundraising, to find out more. Katie, great to see you. Thank you for joining us on the Charity Show. It's lovely to have you on as a guest today. We talk a lot on this show about the fact that we work in challenging times at the moment. The third sector is going through some challenging times in terms of all kinds of things, but fundraising primarily being one of the toughest of those things that we're working our way through at the moment. Could you give us a quick overview, first off, perhaps, around some of those, around sort of the fundraising landscape as a whole? What's it like at the moment for the third sector? What kind of landscape are we working in?
Well, I mean, the good news to start with is that this remains a country filled with a lot of generous people. And the British people are continuing to give to charity. You know, nearly 3 out of 4 British adults did something charitable last year, whether that was donating money, volunteering or sponsoring somebody. And what that has meant for this country is that £13.9 billion was donated by the British public, which is just amazing. And that's up from 10 billion before the pandemic. But less people are giving. So there's a challenge in there. So less people are giving, but those who are giving more. And so whilst there's more money, the future is challenging, and there is no doubt out there that the world is a difficult place for charities who are trying to meet ever-increasing needs all the time.
I saw that figure of £13.9 billion. It blew me away. It's an incredible sum, and it puts us right at the top of the table in terms of being one of those most philanthropic of countries in the world, which is fantastic. But it kind of goes against a bit in all that we've heard about the cost of living crisis having an impact on fundraising and being, negatively impacting charities. Has that been overplayed, do you think? Or actually, would that figure have been greater had it not been for the cost of living crisis?
Well, yeah. So the figure would have been greater if the number of people who used to donate were still donating. So to give you an idea what that looks like in terms of numbers, before the pandemic, 65% of people made some form of donation to a charity, and that's dropped to 58%, which is a lot of people when you think about how many adults there are in this country. So it's offset by the fact that those people are giving more, but there are less of them. And so that is a concern for charities looking ahead to the future, because there's so many charities under so much pressure because inflation means that the amount of money they're getting in doesn't go as far. The pressure on services is so much higher, and therefore the need for the British public to carry on being generous is so important. But if that decline in the number of people donating continues, that's definitely a concern.
Do you think as well, are people giving differently? I saw in that report about the number of committed donors. I think that figure of 65% down to 58% was from the way I read it, is that was sort of committed donors, people giving regularly on a monthly basis that's dipped. Do you think because of the cost of living crisis that maybe people are changing the way they give and perhaps not committing so much but giving more on a one-off basis perhaps? Are you seeing that as a pattern?
So there's a lot of different reasons in there as to why this is happening. So yes, people are donating in a different way. So technology is having a huge impact on that. As we use cashless, people are giving via QR codes and credit cards and online in a way that they never did before, and that number continues to grow every year by huge amounts. But also, and I think this is where, when we're looking at why are the numbers of people donating dropping, most people give in response to a direct ask. So all the research says that that's why people give. Somebody asks them and connects with them on a cause. But there are less ways for charities to make those asks now. So restrictions in data protection and things like that mean that it's more difficult to make that ask of donors. And in return, that means that less people are donating. So there's a lot of different reasons in there, but these are all reasons that charities need to pay really close attention to in terms of thinking about what they're asking and who they're asking, and making sure that they're connecting with their donors in the best way.
Piers, I know you've got a question coming up, but I just wanted to jump in there from the firefighter charity perspective. I think we could definitely relate to that. I think during the cost of living crisis especially, it almost felt wrong to directly ask all the time, like in the way that we might have done before before that cost of living crisis. Is that something as well? Have charities asked less as well? Totally understand what you mean about it getting harder for charities to ask due to regulations and everything else. But do you actually think that charities might be asking less because they're aware of the pressures on their supporter base?
I think that charities care deeply about their donors and are being very careful not to put pressure onto people. But at the same time, it's really important that charities really consider the supporter, really consider the supporter journey and the care process for their donors, and make sure that they're asking the right people the right things and communicating their impact directly to their supporters if they want to maximise those gifts.
That's really interesting, Katie, that you say that, because it's the right people, but it's also at the right time and in the right way. All of these things seem to be bubbling under the surface much more now than ever before. It was also fascinating to read in the report the disparity demographically in British donors, with some of the UK's poorest areas giving the most, as a percentage, for example, of household income. Can you shed any light on this? Is it that wealthy people a little bit tighter than those less well off, or is that too much of a broad stroke?
This isn't anything new. I've been involved in fundraising for 2 and a bit decades now, and it's always been the case that those areas, the poorest areas in this country, have always been the most generous. And you can see that, in the reports. I think Sheffield Hallam is the most generous part of the UK, followed by West Belfast. And there's areas all across Scotland and England and Wales with similar demographics. And why is that? Is that just, that's probably cultural. People, maybe they feel more connected to their communities, but it doesn't mean that other people aren't generous, but certainly those communities that are challenged are the most generous, and that's always been the case.
It's really interesting, isn't it? That spotlight, going onto communities and community spirit and community psyche. I mean, we're seeing a lot of that in some of the campaigning that's going on at the moment with the election. That is trying to tap into the psyche of the average donor. Have you got any insights into the kind of psychology of that, Katie? What are the key motivators in people, in regard to giving?
So, fundamentally, giving is good for everybody. It's good for the donor, it's good for the charity, it's good for the cause, and it's good for the community. And there's tons of research that shows that giving and being charitable connects us. It connects us with our local communities, and it helps build a society that just fundamentally has a stronger social fabric. And conversely, some of the research suggests that in areas where we are less community connected, that's the areas in which there's less charitable giving. So I think the two things are connected, but fundamentally, giving is good for everyone.
I think most people in the third sector who work in a charity kind of know this in their DNA, don't they? They know that it's the psychological, sociological, economic factors in the whole myriad of things. What sort of things would you say can change or dramatically change the way people give and the way communities change?
So, I mean, on a personal level, impact of the cost of living, fallout from the pandemic, Brexit, these are all things that will affect on an individual level. For charities, what they need to do is, everything is so data driven now. They have to be really connected and understand who their supporters are and what it is that motivates them and what they can do to connect with their supporters to drive that giving.
And I know my wider fundraising team will be linking pen and paper when it comes to this. But I mean, there are loads of cliches around when it comes to fundraising and giving. Are there? Do you think there is a north-south divide? Can it be a little bit as black and white as that?
It's not a north-south divide. If you think back to what I was talking before about the poorest areas in the country giving most, and the research shows that whether you're in Glasgow or Sheffield or Belfast, people are giving, and across the country, Britain remains such a generous country, and people still continue to give.
Well, I'm sure Tim would probably back me up on this, but certainly from the Brain Tumour Charity, we've seen people's resilience and people's wanting to give and support us, even through the COVID and the cost of living and beyond, is still very, very strong, even when all these pressures are still out there.
Yeah, I know, absolutely right. I think it is interesting, but we have seen a sort of a change in the way people give, I think, and I think what I was touching on earlier, perhaps people slightly less inclined to give on a regular, committed monthly basis, because for them, they see the pressure on all their monthly bills, all the direct debits that go out of your bank account every month, and so therefore they might be less more reluctant to stick a tenner in there every week for their charity or every month for their charity. But we do see, more events taking place now, and especially now that COVID restrictions are no longer in place, people are doing more events for us, and those kind of challenge events and those kind of fundraising activities. So there's more of that going on, more one-off giving, but perhaps a decline in that regular committed giving. So I think that's definitely a pattern that we're seeing at the charity. But it sounds, Katie, like that's something that's universal, and that's sort of going on. Yeah. Just one other thing I'm really keen to explore, and I saw another report on this recently as well, is young people as a group and as an audience. And the report I read was basically highlighted how much of an issue it is for charities to connect with young people, and it's almost like a lost generation in regards to giving and in regards to sort of just connecting with charities. Is that something that you're seeing? Are charities struggling to connect with young people? And what are some of the influences that are important to bear in mind when it comes to young people?
Mm-hmm. Are they struggling to connect with young people? I'm not sure, but I think that charities are going to have to really change the way in which they do those connections. And this is where we see the increase in digital giving and technology that has to be embraced by charities if they want to continue to connect with the new generation coming forwards. And I think that, so these emerging technologies do give opportunities for the future, but so charities really have to embrace that and engage with it. I think that young people will still give, but I think that what their expectations are from charities are different, and they are much more questioning and much more, they want to be connected with the cause. They care deeply, and they want to give to causes that they care about.
And one of the interesting things I read in that report was the fact that the kind of people who influence young people to give, aren't celebrities, and it's not really the charities themselves. It's social media influencers. Those are the people who they listen to. So if you're not, somebody on TikTok, some successful TikToker or YouTuber sells you to go and donate, then they're likely to go and do it. Listen to them much more than they'll listen to their parents, or they'll listen to a celebrity, or they'll listen to a charity message. So is that something you've seen, or is the stark reality here is that have we all got to get a TikTok account, and we all got to jump on TikTok and tap up these social media influencers?
Yeah, we just might. I mean, there's some. This is really exciting stuff. Gaming is probably going to be the way that people give in the next decades. And yeah, TikTok, social influencers. We have to listen to our kids. We have to be in tune and understand the way that they want to contribute to society. And just because they want to do it differently to how we might have done it, it doesn't make it a bad thing.
But we've got to keep up with them. That's the thing. So you've got to, it's the people who've been around for a little while, like me and Piers. You've got to educate ourselves into what young people are doing. I know my kids love gaming, but I don't know anything about how you fundraise through gaming. So that's, again, a great example of how we've got to learn to keep up.
And then maybe that comes back also, Tim and Katie, as well. We've got our social media team at my charity. I've got some people who just, TikTok is in their blood. I mean, it's largely witchcraft to what I do. But, that generation of the new, and digital savvy is what some of the charities need to embrace, definitely in their comms team. And I think we're seeing that being rolled out in the fundraising team, so that actually TikTok or those social media platforms are second nature actually to a charity person.
Yeah, and I mean, like 15 years ago, I remember having battles in the charity I worked in at the time just to get Facebook in the conversation. And now you're talking about your social media team. These teams didn't exist 15 years ago. Imagine what teams will exist 15 years from now. So I think as long as we're not scared of change, and as long as we're willing to learn and embrace it, then we can get those opportunities for our causes and our charities in different ways to reach out and connect with people.
AI could be doing it all for us. Just press a button and there you go. Sorts out everything for us. It might not be any jobs. It might all be out of the job.
I think as long as we remember, AI needs to be a co-pilot and not an autopilot, and it still needs a human being in there. But again, that's another great opportunity, I think. I think we should be less worried about change and challenges and embrace the opportunities that are out there for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on a similar vein to that, really, in terms of the fact that, there's so much going on in the world competing for people's attention, not just social media, but, the media as a whole and all that's going on there. Every major business has some kind of corporate social responsibility messaging going on as well. So there's lots of competing messaging going on and all of that's competing for pounds in people's pockets. What would your advice be to charities in terms of how they can rise above the noise and to make sure they stand out amongst all of that?
I think they have to be absolutely focused on their purpose. So each charity will be trying to fix a problem, and they need to be laser focused about what that is. And that is what will cut through. That's what will stand out, and that's what will connect with their supporters.
Yeah, absolutely. Really clear, being clearly defined and on your direction, really important. And for those sort of working in fundraising at the moment, whether that's in individual giving, community fundraising, trusts, legacies, whatever, what are you seeing any specific sort of trends? Are charities focusing their energies in any one area in particular at the moment, or is there some areas that are booming and some areas that aren't, perhaps?
So really interesting. So, and this is a bit of a theme of this conversation, digital fundraising remains really strong, and all these emerging technologies mean that there's all sorts of things to learn and try and opportunities. In memory and legacy giving continues to increase every single year. And fundraising events, you mentioned that a few minutes ago, they're making a real comeback after the pandemic. And lotteries and things like that are continuing to attract donors. But we're also seeing lots of new people coming into the fundraising sector, which is a great thing. But that means we have to teach the basics, and we have to make sure that people are fundraising to the best and most excellent standards that they can. We have to keep opening that door to bring more and more new people into the sector so that we can diversify and strengthen our profession.
Really interesting. You mentioned in memory and legacy there. Is that doing well because of work that took place years ago? Because obviously it's not a cash cow in the fact that you put a bit of effort in now and it generates income straight away. That's a long burn, that is, in terms of when you reap the benefits of that. Does that mean that the work that was done years back is actually now bearing fruit?
Absolutely. And there's so much research into this area, and part of the Chartered Institute of Fundraising, we host Remember a Charity, who specifically focus on legacy giving, and it is years and years of work. But that doesn't mean that if charities don't currently have a big legacy program that they should write themselves off, but they need to invest in it and they need to have a long-term plan. But it is making an enormous impact on so many charities, the fact that they put that investment in years previous.
So that's an important consideration when fundraising teams are expanding, when fundraising teams are increasing in the pressures and the workloads that they have, Katie, one of their, part of their armory of it. What about the workload and the well-being for fundraisers at the moment? I know that the Chartered Institute of Fundraising has been involved in a study recently about all this, and it wasn't particularly good news.
It's tough out there, it's tough out there, and fundraisers had a challenging time during the pandemic. Many were furloughed, and many of those that weren't furloughed carried a lot of weight on their shoulders to bring in money to support their charities through such a difficult time. And then we came back after the pandemic, and there we were sat in the cost of living crisis. And then there's been other huge challenges, Ukraine, Gaza, challenges for the world. And fundraisers are those who are trying to bring in that extra money to try and meet these challenges for their causes that they care deeply about. And so well-being for fundraisers is really important. And it is affecting many fundraisers. Some recent research suggested that 1 in 10 fundraisers might leave the fundraising profession entirely. And a significant other number were looking to change jobs. And so charities really need to pay attention to not just the well-being of their fundraisers, but making sure that they're investing in their fundraisers, because much as we'd love it, money doesn't actually go on cheese, and it has to be worked really hard for.
Yes, and I guess the downside of charities being at the forefront of, we'll say, for the last few years and getting kickstarted again after COVID, the downside is that the pressures are going to be on the fundraisers to bring in the incomes and the funds for this. So how can charities address this? How could charities support fundraisers and fundraising teams?
So I think there are a number of things that are really important. Charities need to invest in fundraising and fundraisers. So they need budgets to be able to raise the funds, and they need investment as people in their training and professional development. good fundraisers bring in the most money. So if charities invest in their fundraisers, they'll see the return. And then, like everybody else, good culture, good mental health supports, and being a good place to work is really, really important for fundraisers.
It's a tough job, isn't it? Because it's ultimately it's a little bit like a finance job. It's so often it's target driven, and the pressure's on if you don't meet your targets. And I could see in recent times how that adds all kinds of pressure to people. So it's no surprise that people are walking away from it. That's really sad, isn't it? In terms of the potential for fundraising going forward. How do we attract people into those jobs if people are leaving at the other end?
So it's about fundraising can be the most rewarding of careers, and by persuading charities of that need to invest in fundraising and invest in their fundraisers to support them can enable people to have those amazing and wonderful careers. But charities need to put the work in to make sure the culture is right. And we need to help charities and fundraisers grow charitable giving. We need to change the perceptions out there of fundraising. It is a proper job. It is a career. And, fundraisers just do the most amazing things. Fundraisers are helping to cure cancer. They're helping to house the homeless. They're helping to make sure that young children can play sports in their communities. These things wouldn't happen without fundraisers. So we need to change that perception in the country of how valuable fundraisers are to our society.
And tell us, Katie, about the Chartered Institute of Fundraising. How do you guys help charities, and how can you help individual fundraisers?
So we are the professional membership body there to support fundraisers have that most rewarding of careers. And we want to do this in 4 different ways. We want to help grow giving in the country. We want to change that perception of fundraising. We want to bring new talent in and support new talent and encourage new talents. And we want to support fundraisers to be excellent at their jobs, doing their fundraising to the highest of standards. So we're here for fundraisers, and we're here to support you.
Fantastic. And Katie, jump in a time machine for me, if you will, and fast forward 5 years, maybe even 10 years if you want to, and tell me what changes we'll see over that time. Where will the fundraising? What changes will the fundraising landscape see over the next sort of 5 to 10 years, do you think?
I'd like us to grow charitable giving by an extra 5 billion in this country, because that would just make the most amazing difference to all the causes that we all work for. I'd like fundraisers to be seen as the go-to career. I want children in schools to say, when I grow up, I want to be a fundraiser. I want people to know that what an amazing career they can have. And I want it to be easy for people to give, and for people to, we talked earlier about how good fundraising, how good giving is for everyone. So let's do everything we can to make that an experience that people can have everywhere in the country.
Brilliant. Katie, thank you ever so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us today. It's been great.
Thanks so much for having me.
In each episode of The Charity Show, we want to celebrate our sector superstars, those incredible people working, volunteering and fundraising across our sector. And you can nominate your deserving colleagues, volunteers or fundraisers. Just email us at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com or get in touch through the links in the show notes. You can even send us a voice message that we can play out in the next episode. So who's your superstar this week, Tim?
Well, I've got 2 again this week. So I've got 2 guys who, well, first of all, how's your table tennis, Piers? Are you a table tennis player? Ping pong?
I am until my son gets involved, and then I'm just not very good at this at all.
No. Neither am I. But these 2 guys, 2 friends, have beaten the world record for the longest table tennis rally whilst fundraising for charity. So I thought this is a great story. Dan Ives and Lloyd Gregory from Bristol achieved the record at Ping Pod in Bristol as part of a fundraiser for the stillbirth and neonatal charity SANDS. They've raised more than £5,000 for the cause so far, after Dan sadly lost his daughter Lily Ray Ives in 2020. So these 2 maintained their rally for 13 hours, 36 minutes and 36 seconds, beating the previous record by 1 hour and 46 minutes. So that's just take a minute to think about that. 13 hours, 36 minutes and 36 seconds of playing table tennis back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's mental.
My attention span falters after 13 minutes, let alone 13 hours. So yeah, all credit to them.
That is amazing, isn't it? So yeah, so they're my superstars. Amazing job. What about you, Piers?
Well, I'm going to revisit someone that we mentioned before in the episodes, Tim. You'd mentioned Russell Cook in a previous episode, and listeners may remember him as the hardest geezer. He was the man who ran Africa. Well, a book about his experiences is due for release later this year, October the 24th at the moment, chronicling all the highs and the lows, of which no doubt there'll be so many. It took the 27-year-old 352 days to run the continent, and he crossed the Tunisian fizzy. It took the 27-year-old 352 days to run the continent, and he crossed the Tunisian finish line in April, raising over £1 million for charity. With superb understatement, Russell said the book would tell stories from the most insane year of my life. He went on to tell the BBC that the challenge fundamentally changed who I am, physically, mentally, and spiritually. In my book, he says, I not only want to tell the untold stories of what really happened during the most insane year of my life, I talk about the steps I took to overcome all the challenges along the way. He goes on to say he hopes he can pass on some of the lessons he's learnt, but above all, I hope my story of a truly mad adventure can inspire you to really believe in yourself and go and get you want out of life, whatever that looks like for you. So, fantastic stories all together in one place. And Russell was raising money for the running charity, and he recently completed a brand new challenge of running to Germany so he could be there for the Euros. So October the 24th, it's going to be a fascinating read from Russell Cook.
Excellent. Yeah, good on him. And I hope he's enjoyed the football, or is enjoying the football. At the time of us recording, England are still in it, just about, somehow or other. But yeah, so I hope he's enjoyed that amazing run running to Germany for the Euros as well. Amazing guy.
So that's it for this episode. Huge thanks to Katie for giving us all plenty of food for thought in regard to fundraising. What have we got coming up over the next few weeks?
Well, we've got lots to get our teeth into. In the next episode, we're going to be talking strategy with Strategic Leader of the Year, Vicky Beavers, Chief Executive of the Sleep Charity. And over the weeks ahead, we're going to find out how small charities can use the power of research to build their profile and gain media exposure. We'll also, hopefully, be hearing from lots of you in terms of your shout-outs for your charities. So as I talked about earlier, get them into us on our voice message tool. The link to that tool is in the show notes. So get recording and we'll play them out in the next episode.
Absolutely. And don't forget, there are loads of ways you can get involved in future episodes too. Share your news, tell us about your latest innovations, events or campaigns, or just tell us what you'd like us to cover.
That's right. You can get in touch through the links in the show notes or email us, as Piers said earlier on, at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com. And don't forget, we always want to hear about your superstars too. So nominate someone who's done something outstanding.
And in the meantime, please follow us on your usual podcast platform and leave us a review, both of which will help other charity folks to find the show.
So that's it for this episode. Take care and we'll see you soon.